Okay, are we ready to go? Okay, welcome back everybody to the afternoon session. So this session is on produced water, keeping it in play. You heard a lot of good discussions this morning around issues around the regulatory and the policy in water, including produced water. And then we had a little conversation around lunch around agriculture and use of the feedstocks, or the food stocks or biofuel stocks, or whatever you want to call it. And this afternoon, we have three speakers before the closing speaker. Roy Hartstein, who is the Vice President of Strategic Solutions at Southwestern Energy Company, will talk about the Energy Water Initiative, which is an industry coalition. It's part of the solution. The second speaker, Secretary Teague from Oklahoma, will give us a state perspective. And then we have the case study around a small company who has Hydrus technology that has been up and running in Australia and is now winding its way through the policy activities to get itself up and running in the United States. And then it'll be followed by our afternoon keynote, Kathleen Jackson on the Texas Water Development, from the Texas Water Development Agency, and around some of the progress that's been made since we had our last workshop. So I think it's going to be a nice, cohesive conversation, and we really would like some interaction. We're going to take questions after each speaker, so the speakers will keep their comments relatively short so we can do questions after each one. And then if we have time, we'll do a few at the end, but I think we will run out of time. That's the history here. So Roy Hartstein, again, Vice President of Strategic Solutions at Southwestern Energy, has more than 30 years of experience in the energy industry. That includes both upstream exploration and production and downstream pipeline operations. His current responsibilities include overseeing the company's water stewardship program, energy conserving water, and other initiatives that seek to balance the company's impact on the community, economy, and the environment. I will let him talk about the Energy Water Initiative as part of the solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. EWI, the Energy Water Initiative, is a group of oil and gas companies that have joined together to deal with a common issue between us, and that is how we use water. Today, let's see if I can make this go. There we go. Energy, water, and food are three of the major issues facing the world today. And we believe that oil and gas falls right in the middle of that because we compete with other users of water. We use a lot of water. We produce oil and gas, which is used to create energy. So it's very important on how we manage the water that we use. And our industry doesn't necessarily have the best image. What I would like to do today is help clear up maybe some of the myths about how we use water and what we do with water, and give you a little better understanding of what's going on in the industry to deal with water more effectively. If you look at the water use in the United States, in the 1980s, water use peaked, and the water use has dropped off while population has continued to grow. So water use is beginning to be addressed, and a lot of the issues or a lot of that progress with water has to do with water efficiency and with people conserving water. The message has gotten out to people that you need to conserve water. It's been effective, but we still have water problems, as we've seen with drought around the country and a lot of different issues related to water. If you look at water withdrawals, the vast majority of water use in the United States comes from surface water. The second largest source is groundwater. There are uses for saline groundwater. The small slice here is saline groundwater. The predominant users of saline groundwater are oil and gas and mining. So if you break that down and you look regionally, there are regional differences. Everywhere in the United States is not the same. One of the conversations we had at lunch, and it came up when Todd talked about agriculture. Water is a local problem. So in the areas that we operate at Southwestern Energy, in Arkansas, the predominant source is groundwater. In Pennsylvania, Colorado, and West Virginia, where we work, the predominant sources are surface water. There's an abundance of surface water in those states, and that's where most of the water is drawn. So that's the source of water. Groundwater impacts, where groundwater withdrawals occur with heavy withdrawals, there's some areas in the country that are highly stressed. And you can end up with significant depletion of groundwater sources. We operated in northern Louisiana, and when we tried to withdraw from a groundwater source in northern Louisiana, we got stopped by the state because that groundwater was being severely impacted, and the drawdown was to the extent that it was depleting that resource. And so we had to find an alternate source for water in northern Louisiana. So you can see here in the red where impacts of significant groundwater withdrawals are having a major impact in the communities. Other impacts from withdrawals, you can impact streams. So groundwater withdrawals can also have effects on streams. Groundwater percolates to the surface and flows into streams. Even groundwater withdrawals can impact surface water. When you deplete stream water, it can have impacts on the biodiversity in the stream. Low stream flows can affect fish life and aquatic life. So there are things that we need to be concerned about. We use a lot of water. We need to be concerned about how we use that water so we don't have those impacts. Where does water get used? Across the U.S., approximately 1% of water is used for mining and oil and gas. Far more is used for irrigation or thermoelectric power generation. But even there, water uses vary depending on the region of the country you're in. Again, two of the regions that we work in Arkansas, the predominant user of water in Arkansas is for irrigation. 1% is used for oil and gas. In the case of our operations, we use less than 1/10 of 1% of the water in Arkansas. Pennsylvania, the predominant user is thermoelectric power generation. Very different picture. I think of Pennsylvania as an agricultural state, and yet agriculture is a very, very small piece of what water consumption is in Pennsylvania. So with only 1% being used for oil and gas, what's the big deal? Why worry about oil and gas consumption if it's only 1%? One of the things that's very different about oil and gas consumption is when we use water and we inject it underground, not all of it comes back. It is a consumptive use. And so we should be concerned about it. We should care about what we do with water. And if we can do something about the 1% we use, others can do something about the larger percentages they use, we can help solve the problem. As an example for Southwestern Energy, we used in 2014 78 million barrels of water, hydraulically fracturing more than 400 wells. But of that, only 46.5 million barrels were fresh water. 60% of the water that we used was fresh water. 40% was produced water, flowback water from our wells, or saline groundwater that we use, or alternate sources of water. So we're already doing something about the use of fresh water to reduce our impacts. And we're not alone. We see this example across our industry. In the EWI, the group that we're part of, we've shared information across all these organizations, and we find that many other companies in our industry are using saline groundwater as their primary source of hydraulic fracture water. Many of the companies are recycling and reusing water so that they don't continue to withdraw water from freshwater sources, and it offsets a significant piece of what we use. So as it was pointed out earlier, when you look at the total water use in the oil and gas industry, total water use represents the big picture, but only a fraction of that is actually fresh water consumed. What other sources can we use? For Southwestern Energy, we consider an alternate source to be something that nobody else will use. So we start with a definition of local freshwater quality, maybe 1,000 parts per million in some areas, it may be 2,000 parts per million TDS in other areas. But we look at the local definition of what is fresh water, and we consider alternate water to be something that is not considered fresh. Second criteria is it something that somebody else will use? We look for sources that we're not competing with other users. So we're using water that others don't find to be attractive. The different types of sources include flowback produced water. So that's the water that we put downhole and use the first time as fresh water, but it flows back to us, and we use that water, recycle it, and reuse it. It may be brackish groundwater. In Pennsylvania and in West Virginia, there are abundant sources of acid mine drainage, acid mine impaired water that has very high levels of acid in it, and that today is polluting streams. We can use that as an alternate source and help reduce the pollution in streams. Coal bed methane produced water, in some cases it can be very clean and may be a source of fresh water, but in other cases coal bed methane may be above the limit of total dissolved solids and make it an alternate water potential. The challenges that we have with using alternate water include making sure that we acquire enough water. So if we drill into a saline aquifer, we need to make sure that there's enough productivity so that we can get enough water from that aquifer to be able to supply our needs. There may be gas in the water. In the case of coal bed methane water in particular, the reason that coal bed methane wells are drilled is because there's gas present and large volumes of water are produced in order to get the gas out of the water. So you have to deal with that and make sure you're addressing the issues of gas entrained in the water. We want to make sure if we're in a saline aquifer that we're disconnected from any freshwater source. It would make no sense for us to drill into a saline aquifer, produce water from a saline aquifer, and actually draw fresh water down into it to replace it. So one of the criteria we have is if we're going to drill into saline aquifers, we want to make sure that they're hydraulically disconnected so that we're actually creating a benefit and not continuing to do harm. Then we have to have a compatibility with the wells that we're stimulating. So we had to do a chemical analysis of the water and make sure that the water that we're using and the rock that we're penetrating with that water, that there's not a chemistry problem and we're not creating a high degree of scaling or having compatibility problems. And then finally, it needs to be economic. We need to make sure that the price fits for the purpose that we're pursuing. We are in the business of making money, so we want to make sure that we're doing it intelligently and we're solving problems in a way that continues to create economic benefit. I'm missing some things here. This is a look at the water cycle and how water enters our operations, how it's used, how it flows back, and then ultimately what has to be done with it. Linda, I wish I'd gotten the PowerPoint here instead of the PDF, but
they didn't load the PDF.
They didn't load the PowerPoint. Over on the far left, the arrow entering is where fresh water would enter the system. So typically when you're doing a first well, you need to start with fresh water. So fresh water enters the system. We have to store it, transport it, bring it into the job. We use fresh water in drilling. Then that drilling water is captured, cleaned, stored, and then reused. We take other fresh water, combine with the reuse water from drilling, and use that for hydraulic fracturing. Once we drill and complete a well and it begins to flow back, some of that water comes back to the surface. We capture that water, store it, and then we have to decide what we do with the water that we capture. That water is either moved to disposal well, or it may go up through a treatment process to be recycled, brought back into the system, and used for a future well operation. And in many cases for Southwestern Energy, because we're doing a whole lot of dry gas drilling, we're drilling in areas that are predominantly natural gas driven and they're dry gas, there's not a lot of liquids present. We're able to take our water with very little treatment, remove the solids, and bring it right back into the system and continue to use that water for hydraulic fracturing with nothing more than a settlement to allow the solids to drop out and bring it back around and use it and reuse it and reuse it continually. In the case of Arkansas today, 100% of the source water that we're using for our current jobs is produced water from previous production operations. So we're capturing all that water, recycling it back, and it is our sole source of water today for drilling and completing wells. One of the issues that we're faced with is what do we do with the long-term produced water? So when we drill a well and we begin to produce water, as little as 8% of the water may come back initially, and that's called flowback water. You drill a well, you start production, water begins coming to the surface almost immediately as soon as you finish the well, and you get an initial flowback of a volume of water. And we range between 8 and 40% of that water comes back fairly quickly. That range varies between different parts of the world. So in the Marcellus, we get about 8%. In the Fayetteville Shale, we get about 25%. In other areas, they can get up to 40 or 50% back fairly quickly. but the water continues to come back over time. And what you see here are decline curves showing water production for different parts of the country. In the Permian, the water drops off but stays fairly high. They get a very large volume of water continuing to come back on a daily basis. In the Marcellus, it drops off and becomes fairly low. We get a much lower volume. The volumes vary, but the problem is the same. You have to deal with that volume of water and understand what to do with it. In the Fayetteville Shale today, the reason that we can stimulate all of our wells with produced water is because we have 4,000 operating wells. And if you look at the Fayetteville Shale, typically they'll produce around 10 barrels a day of produced water. So we're dealing with today in the Fayetteville Shale about 25,000 barrels a day of produced water that we produce, store, transport, and reuse in our production operations. But as we go forward and we're not continuing to drill wells, then we'll have 25,000 barrels of water a day that we need to do something with. And so that's our challenge. Is produced water to be a waste, or is it actually a resource? We think of water as a resource. We've talked today a lot about the problems with water around the world, the energy-water nexus, the issues of water drought, the issues of groundwater depletion. We think that produced water should be a resource that can be treated, put back into the environment, used for beneficial uses. How do we get there? First, we have to view produced water as a resource, not as a waste. Second, we have to understand what's in produced water, and it varies. As much as it varies for the types of uses of water around the country, and it varies for the volumes of water that come back, what's in the water varies as well. So we'll have to characterize that water and understand what's in it and what do we need to treat for. Then we need to understand what are the potential uses so that we know what level do we need to treat that water in order to take it to a beneficial use. And what are the barriers? What's in the way? What gets in the way of us being able to treat water and use it for other purposes? Whether that purpose may be agriculture, livestock, or simply treating and putting it back in a river. Those are the challenges we face. The solutions that we need are low-cost treatment systems and regulatory support from people to help us find the right solutions, the right answers. What level do we need to treat water to, and how do we view it as a resource so that we be solution-minded and not just problem-minded? It's great to talk about the problems, but what we really want is the solutions. And I view EWI and this group of companies that we've worked with as part of the solution rather than just part of the problem.
Thank you, and we'll take some questions. Go ahead.
You had listed one of your alternatives, the acid mine drainage. Are you not? Are you using it? And if so, are you concerned about like the liability? Because then once you have it, it's yours. And is it hard to dispose of then, or how do you deal with that?
Well, in Pennsylvania, and Pennsylvania is where we work predominantly. We're also working in West Virginia, so we're working with state legislatures and the agencies in West Virginia to deal with the issue there. In Pennsylvania, they recently passed a law that removes some of that liability. So we're liable for what we use, but we're not liable for the remaining volume. In the case of Southwestern Energy, we took a little different approach with acid mine drainage. We could have used the water as an alternate source and put it into our hydraulic frac. What we chose to do instead was to work with the state and create a treatment system, and we funded a treatment system to treat the entire discharge and create a permanent solution to the acid mine drainage rather than a temporary solution. And so that water is being treated now, or will be very shortly. Our project is nearly done. And it will be treated, and the water will be clean, and the pH will go back to a normal level. So we chose to do something a little bit different. Rather than spending the money to go up and truck to it, take it out of the river and use it, we just did a treatment process. Now we can withdraw fresh water.
You got a decline curve up there in the different shales. I'm having a hard time to distinguish between produced water and flowback water. Is the decline curve more showing the produced water, or is that your flowback water that is showing?
What it's showing is water. And how you define produced water versus flowback water is really a time-dependent issue. The very early stages of production, generally speaking, we consider to be flowback. The longer term, we consider to be produced. Now, certain locations, certain states, there are definitions that until you flow back 100% of the volume that you used, it's considered flowback water. And those regulatory definitions can drive how you manage the water. So it's different in different areas. But generally speaking, if you look at the early part of that decline curve, the first portion of very high volume flowback is what I would term flowback, and then the long term is more of the produced water.
Can you talk a little bit about the challenges that you face logistically with moving around and storing produced water, and then also have a follow-up for you?
Yeah, transportation and storage are two big issues, and it depends on regional issues. What transportation mechanisms are available? Does everything have to go in truck, or can you use pipeline? Pipelines are preferable. We've built pipeline systems in Pennsylvania so that we can move water through pipe rather than moving it by truck. We like to get the trucks off the road as much as possible because it reduces our impacts on the community. So logistically, you have to deal with local regulations, what's permitted, and economics. Can you build a pipeline network? If you have a fragmented play where you've got a lot of small acreage areas that are not connected, it becomes very difficult to pipe those together unless there's a regional player that is building a pipeline network to do that.
And sorry, are you treating this water to remove the TDS out of the water so you can handle it safely, or are you moving it around still with the salinity inherent to the water?
Yeah, when we initially produce it, we produce it, store it, and then move it, and so most of the solids are settling out. In Southwestern Energy's case, we largely are using above ground or in-ground storage areas, so we have storage reservoirs, and the solids settle to the bottom of the reservoir and then get cleaned out periodically.
One last question, go ahead.
So the EWI here, what I see is a lot of operators. In your mind, what's the role of the oilfield service company in this? I mean, they're providing the chemicals, they're providing the additives. I mean, they should be somehow involved in maybe finding the solution to it.
Possibly, but right now we have an organization that's made up of operators that are working together, share information and knowledge across our industry. So we're sharing knowledge with one another about how we're managing the water that we flow back and produce and how we manage and dispose of it.
That's one of the, that's actually a great question, and that part of what the Baker Institute and others who are actually participating in this conference are trying to bring together those conversations. And so this one is specifically produced water. This is a group that's very focused on what's going on in the oil and gas industries, but there are other groups that are looking at bringing together the broader conversation. So, okay, with that, we're going to move on to the second speaker. Secretary Michael Teague serves as Oklahoma's first Secretary of Energy and Environment. Prior to his appointment, he served in the U.S. Army for nearly 30 years, retiring with the rank of colonel. His services included commander for the Tulsa District of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, where he was responsible for a civil works program encompassing all of Oklahoma, a large portion of the southern Kansas, and the panhandle of northern Texas. Throughout his career, Secretary Teague has dealt with power generation and distribution, water desalination, and environmental impact studies. He has facilitated and negotiated numerous solutions regarding federal and state agencies, tribes, and local stakeholders, and has acted as liaison between Tulsa District and the United States Congress. Secretary Teague has also served in the operational assignments in Germany, Honduras, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and numerous Yeah, it's a long list. He received his bachelor's degree in civil engineering from Norwich University and master's degrees in operation analysis from the Naval Postgraduate School. Welcome, Secretary Teague.
Roy and I have talked on a couple of different panels. Aspen Institute, I think, was the other place that we were talking recently. So not necessarily to your question about where the service companies in this picture, but what Roy gave you is what's the industry doing, and now I want to talk about what policy and regulators should be doing. So I am the first Secretary of both Energy and Environment in Oklahoma. I get that question a lot. I spoke to the Society of Environmental Journalists last week, actually at a saltwater disposal site in Oklahoma. I got a lot of questions of how dare you combine energy and environment. My answer is it's pretty hard in Oklahoma to have an energy topic or an energy issue that has not somehow got an environmental aspect to it. It's really hard in Oklahoma to have an environmental issue that doesn't somehow touch the energy industry. We are an energy state, right? Number 4 in the nation in natural gas, number 6 in oil, number 4 in wind. And we have all of the same endangered species, drought, water quality, water quantity issues that everybody else does. So it's worked very, very well. Jay Albert is here, so when we first combined, Jay was the deputy for energy in the office. There were 3 people in the energy office and 3 people in the environment office. We still have 6 people. But I say that because I'm not a regulator. So my job is not to be the oil and gas regulator in Oklahoma. I'm not an environmental regulator. I don't write water quality standards. I don't enforce those. We have agencies that do that. My job is to bring all of those agencies, both energy and environment, together. So there's 35 different agencies, boards, compacts, and commissions is how we talk about it in the Energy and Environment Secretariat. Out of that, there's really about 10 that I would say are full-time, day-to-day agencies, everything from our Department of Mines to the Corporation Commission, regulators on the oil and gas side and our public utilities, to the Water Resources Board, Department of Environmental Quality, Wildlife. Our municipal power or large public power authorities are part of this, but there's about 10 that are full-time, climate survey and geologic survey as well. So we brought all of those agency directors together, and for some of them, they had to introduce themselves to each other, even though they'd worked for the state for a long time. I just asked them to go around the table and say, hey, just tell me the top 3 things that you're working on right now. So some of you may know Lori Rotenberry. Texas stole her. She was the executive director of our Corporation Commission. Now she's the Oil and Gas Division at the Railroad Commission. But Lori started, and the very first thing she said was, we're working on seismicity. Half the table was working on seismicity, none of them working together. Probably not the picture you want of your public servants. Okay, but there is not an issue bigger right now in Oklahoma than seismicity. Up, down.
Right. Yeah, there you go.
There we go. So if you just take magnitude 3 and above, okay, that's generally a felt earthquake. Just take 3 and above, and I can actually go back one more year. If you do 2012, it's about 3 dozen. I think there was 36. And then in a year later, you're at 109, 585. We're well over 670 already this year. 3 today. 2 4.5 magnitudes last weekend. One of those was underneath Cushing. So if you're in the industry, that should make you as nervous as it makes me. We have a huge earthquake problem in Oklahoma. Okay. So 2 years ago, we start bring together energy and environment. We start talking about earthquakes. And the very first thing I get is ban fracking in Payne County because it's causing earthquakes. Okay, that's not true. In Oklahoma, we have 1 recorded earthquake that was felt based on hydraulic fracturing of a well. Okay, just 1 out of a lot. Okay, it's not ban fracking. But we also had this side that said, it's all natural. Pay no attention to the guy behind the green curtain. It's not us. There's nothing to see here. Move along. Okay, that's not right either. Okay, this absolutely is about disposal wells, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. Okay, but here's what we did at the state. So the first thing we did is started bringing different groups together. Okay, so in Kansas, because that map extends north of the border, you can imagine earthquakes don't care. Kansas has a task force. It's their geologic survey, it's their Corporation Commission, and it's their KDHE, their Department of Health and Environment. Okay. In Oklahoma, we have a coordinating council. It is all of those state agencies that I just listed, our version of them, our Geologic Survey, our Corporation Commission, our DEQ, our Water Resources Board, our Oklahoma Energy Resources Board, which is kind of a unique, different organization. It's also our universities. It's OU, OSU, and TU, our three larger universities, because I needed to get my fingers out to all the academic research that's being done on the seismicity around the country. And the easiest way to do that is to go through an academic institution to get to it. So Mark Zobek's work, Matt Weingartner's work up in CU Boulder, Katie Kernan's work at Cornell, we needed access to all of that. The stuff that's being done down at UT Austin. Okay. We included our oil and gas industry associations in this group. Okay, so we have two trade associations, oil and gas, Oklahoma Oil and Gas Association, and then our Independent Producers Association. We got a lot of questions of how dare you let the industry in? Okay, I think that's a pretty shallow question. If you think that these are tied to disposal wells, why don't you bring the people in who are operating them, who might know what's going on below the ground? I'm a civil engineer. I only go about 2 levels deep in a basement. I'm not a seismologist. Okay, so they needed to be part of it. We also brought the Groundwater Protection Council in. Mike Paik and that group are in Edmond. Most of you know really the driving force behind Frac Focus. So he gets protecting groundwater and telling the public this is what the industry is doing safely. So we brought all of those groups together. We also needed to do better communications. So that map is actually a screenshot off of the website. So I told you we had these kind of competing conversations about what may or may not be causing earthquakes. Nobody was in the middle telling people exactly what we know and what we don't know, because this is still evolving. So that's earthquakes.ok.gov. That's the toggle with showing all the earthquakes, probably just this last year. There's another toggle below that. You can also show where all the injection wells are. Okay, so we're not hiding anything. We're not pulling any punches. We think it's disposal wells. But I can bring my hands this close and say it's disposal wells. I don't know what aspect of a disposal well. I don't know if it's depth. I don't know if it's volume. I don't know if it's rate. Is it big wells, little wells? Is it time of day? But it's disposal wells. We have 4,200 disposal wells in Oklahoma. And that doesn't count Osage County, which is a really bright white one up there, because in Osage County, BIA manages or attempts to manage the oil and gas industry in Osage County. So we don't regulate up there. Okay, 4,200 disposal wells. Now, Larry Bengal is the oil and gas guy from Arkansas. He gives me crap all the time that they fixed their earthquake problem because they had, I think, 6 disposal wells and 4 earthquakes. Or if I flip that around, Rick, something like that. Six disposal wells, 4 earthquakes. They shut down the 6 wells and the earthquake stopped. Okay? Working on 700 earthquakes, 4,200 disposal wells. You cannot find, or we cannot find, the one-to-one correlation that would make this much, much easier. Certainly much easier from a regulatory and from an operator standpoint. Okay? This is an area problem, but it's absolutely about UIC wells. Okay? So, starting to tie back to what Roy was talking about, is there an opportunity to solve not just the earthquake problem? Okay, that's how much water we disposed of last year in 1 year. Okay, I was going to ask, so Kate this morning was showing the pictures of Lake Travis. So for us, if you're from Oklahoma, that's 1.5 Lake Thunderbirds, which is the water supply for Norman and South Oklahoma City. Okay, that is a lot of water. And so is there an opportunity that we can go after? I really appreciated that Kate showed a drought slide today, because I normally feel like I'm the only guy at an oil and gas conference or conversation that talks about drought. I know from looking for fresh water, but there is not a silver bullet to the drought. Now, I did cheat a little bit. That's the drought monitor from May 5th, which is 5 days into the month of May, when we got 28 inches of rain in 1 month. And so very much what Austin got as well. The drought picture looks very different right now. The problem I have with that is people think, the drought's over, success, declare victory and go home, and it's coming back. I mean, this is not the last time Oklahoma or Texas or any of the western states are going to be fighting a drought. So what are we going to do to be drought resilient? And we've got to be better about it. This is not a silver bullet. Water conservation is a huge piece, okay? people keep looking for new sources of water. I might have your new source of water, but it's not cheap and it's not ready yet. So this is a picture of a Devon facility. It's at the Cana Woodford. It's their recycling facility. This is about, very similar, Roy, to your comments, this is about use less fresh water and use it smarter. Okay? So in one of their operations, can they take their flowback water, because it's not that high in TDS, their produced water, can they clean that up to at least to a level that they could use it at the next well? Okay. There were regulatory and technology barriers to them doing this. On the regulatory side, it was really where the state came in with the Corporation Commission. How do you change, make exceptions to your current regulatory framework that allows innovation like this and still protects the environment? Because you got to do both. Okay. On the technology side, that's really not what the state does. Okay. But the same thing, there were barriers, and how do you overcome those? And my question is, can you do the same thing for produced water? So I took off beneficial use of produced water because I really think this is about drought resiliency, not just beneficial use of produced water. And you know, if you just change that piece right there, you change the conversation. All right? Because I keep talking about drought resiliency with a bunch of oil and gas guys, and they stop in the middle of that black box and they say, I'm not in the water business. You brought 1.5 billion barrels of water to the surface. You're in the water business. Get over it. Okay? And you live in Oklahoma, so be part of a solution. Okay? Just changing that title is huge. Okay? The fact, Linda, that you've brought this group together and that Tony spoke at lunch, that's huge. Because if we don't get out of our silos, we will never fix this problem. Okay. So the opportunity is the same. It's produced water on the side. The big black box in the middle, technology to clean water at scale. So Rick McCurdy is here. I will use your example. Rick has a folder on the desktop of his computer. It's called The Solution. At last count, with several hundred PowerPoint presentations in there of that somebody's got the Holy Grail. And that's not to make fun of the companies that are starting to really be serious about this. And I'm really glad that you're next on this agenda, because there are companies out there that are working on this that really do have a good solution and recognize that they may not have the Holy Grail, but they got this piece of it. And so can I get that piece and this piece and this piece, and we start putting these things together towards a solution? And I think we've got to do that, but it's got to be at scale. Okay? Fit to purpose on this side. That's actually a line from Peter Gravatt. So he's the Office of Drinking Water from the EPA, because I don't think we have to clean all of this water to drinking water standards, because that's incredibly expensive. Okay? But can I clean it enough to use it in thermocooling, like we were talking about this morning? Okay. So in Oklahoma, ag is our biggest water user. Okay. Municipal and industrial together is our second. Thermocooling is number 3, about 13, 14%. Oil and gas is 2% in Oklahoma. Okay. Can I clean it enough that we could use it in a gas plant without corroding all the infrastructure? And I think the answer is yes. And it's probably not as expensive as cleaning it all the way to drinking water. But is it that first step? Can we break the ice? Can we do something besides talking about it, where we actually get going? To the bottom part, it has to be economical across the entire system. So I don't think that the oil and gas industry has to bear the entire cost of this. If you're going to get to use that water on the other end in a drought, you should absolutely be part of that cost, or share part of that cost if you're getting a benefit from it. That's a really hard conversation, and I do appreciate the comments this morning from a lot of different folks that we undervalue as a commodity water in this country. And as much as we talk smack about it in Oklahoma and Texas, that, you know, whiskey's for drinking and water's for fighting, we still don't charge enough for it to really drive it. Drives me crazy that people have got their sprinklers on in Tulsa on Bermuda grass that's supposed to be brown in January, and what they're really doing is making an ice skating rink across the street. But, you know, we work on all those solutions. The last piece on the very bottom, it wrapped in a regulatory framework. So a framework that creates space and protects the environment. It was actually having a conversation about distributed generation on power. And their comment was, that state regulators really, you're just the stick. You're not the carrot, you're the stick. Well, I disagree with that. Our job as regulators is to create the space for innovation. I'm not Hydrus or GE or any of the rest of your companies. But I should make sure that there's a space big enough that you see an opportunity in there instead of just a stick. Okay? But I have to do that where I protect the environment, because absolutely it is both energy and environment, and it's energy and water. It's what we do. This conversation is getting bigger. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here today. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Questions?
Yeah.
Do you have any kind of grant or funds available for new ideas in this area?
We had a program, or have a program called the Energy First Initiative, actually funding out of our office. That was a lot easier to fund at $100 a barrel oil. As far as the state, so last year we had about a $600 million shortfall. This year it's probably going to be bigger than that. But that fund is designed to not only take state money, but outside money as well. We're starting to have some of those conversations. I talked about the Energy Resources Board, and so that's how we do abandoned wells. So producers pay into this fund. 50% of that money goes to cleaning up abandoned wells. Can't tell who the operator is. Again, so we can't make that one-to-one connection, similar to earthquakes. They've cleaned up 14,000 wells, abandoned wells in Oklahoma, just using that money. The other half of their money goes to education. Could there be something like that for earthquakes, for not just research, but actually doing something about it, putting steel in the ground for a recycling facility? That's what we're working on right now.
I asked this because we had this idea to use abandoned wells to harness geothermal energy with a closed loop system and treat the water with that energy. So, but we are looking for some kind of grant to do a pilot study. So, can we apply for those grants in your office, or?
So there's no funds right now, but that's the program that we're looking of. How do we set that up to create that type of a research program?
Okay, gentlemen, wish you.
On the disposal well issue, that is the most comprehensive map I've seen over the past several years of kind of trying to keep up with this. What sort of reporting guidelines or regulations do you have for the outfits that are operating the disposal wells, as far as, rate versus day, and so that the relationships maybe can be made to manage the induced seismicity if it's going to be possible?
I mean, I said we got into here, and we still need to get a little bit tighter. So I think that's exactly your question. 2 years ago, our data reporting requirements were record monthly, report annually. We changed that just about a little over a year ago, to record daily, report monthly. We've got a room filled with data, not in a format that we can use it right now. So we're actually working with the Groundwater Protection Council. Could we take RBDMS, the risk-based data management system, and create a database, make it easier for the operators to report, as well as put it in a format that our geologists and seismologists can analyze on the other end? We're doing that right now.
You and then first. Go ahead.
Secretary Teague, I thought that you defined the problem well and suggested an ultimate silver bullet. What are you doing now, given you're not able to isolate the well to the problem, you've got the problem, it seems to be getting worse. What are you doing now to try to alleviate it?
There's two approaches. So,
Glad you asked, right?
not that I don't get this question a lot. People get frustrated when I do this with my hands, and I don't put my hands all the way together and say, this is the answer right here. We just don't know. And that's so frustrating for people if it's your house that's shaking. In Oklahoma, the Corporation Commission has taken the approach, with the advice through this coordinating council, with the advice of the Geologic Survey, that the main risk is depth. So we're talking primarily about the Arbuckle disposal wells, the Arbuckle formation. Okay. So we took the area where I showed you on that map with all the earthquakes, and we said, if you've got a disposal well in this area of interest, prove the depth of your well. Okay, there were just under 600 wells. 180 of them had drilled all the way through the Arbuckle and were in the basement. Some up to like 60 to 70 feet in the basement. Okay, so this is the risk. This is when you're putting water that you thought was going into here, but it actually ends up in the granite, crystalline granite basement, and now you're lubricating the faults. And so we think that's the highest risk, and that's the approach that our Corporation Commission has taken. If you talk to Kansas, they think it's volumes. So Kansas took 2 counties, Harper and Sumner, I think is the other county up there, and they have stair-stepped the volumes down in those 2 counties about 50% because they think it's volumes. We're both watching each other to see which one works. And that sounds funny, and it's not funny if it's your house, but again, nobody knows yet, and we're watching each other to see, hey, if that works, we're doing it here, and if this, I actually do think it's a combination, so.
Okay, one more question.
Thank you. Excellent presentation. Both of yours, they worked really well, really nicely together as well. To achieve your long-term vision, what kind of partnerships and stakeholder engagement, what different groups do you think need to get together to achieve the longer-term vision of keeping the water in play?
We're probably about a month before we kind of announce something. When we brought this coordinating council together for seismicity, it was really pretty easy to figure out who ought to be in that room. You know, the geologists who were studying the problem, the regulators, the Corporation Commission, the regulated community, the academic community. I think on this one, it's water providers and users. So I don't need somebody in there who says, I'm an oil company, not a water company. It's not helpful to the conversation. We need companies that are being proactive about it. But it needs to be oil and gas. It needs to be utilities. It needs to be municipalities. It needs to be the ag community. It needs to be our regulators at the state. Probably needs to be some of our federal folks as well, federal partners. That's sometimes a hard sell in Oklahoma and Texas. I do consider federal agencies to be partners. So, but I think that's the group that we're looking. And the question right now is, how do we bring them together? What's the format? You know, the coordinating council's not writing a report. That's not our job. I think this could be a group that does write some kind of a report that comes up with recommendations on how to do grants and incentive programs. It's probably a little bit more formal than what our group has been so far, and that's what we're working on right now. It's got to be cross-sector. If we keep having these conversations just among the oil and gas folks or just among the ag folks, we're never going to get anywhere.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Okay, our third speaker is David Kam, who is Chairman and CEO of Hydrus Technology. Again, this is a case study. Hydrus Technology is delivering leading-edge solutions for a range of wastewater, mineral recovery, and environmental remediation challenges. And David has over 30 years' experience as a business founder, managing director, and major projects manager and commercial negotiator. So thank you, and this should be interesting to hear about the issues around starting up in the United States.
Thank you, Linda. Okay. The Russian economist Nikolai Kondratyev first postulated the major cycles of innovation in 1925. The 5 initial major economic cycles have been defined as the Industrial Revolution, the age of steam and railways, the age of steel and electricity, the age of oil, cars and mass production, and the age of information and communication. The global financial crisis of 2007 to 9 highlighted the start of what I call the 6th major wave of innovation, and that is of resource efficiency. The new wave is heralded by changes in the market, societal institutions and technology that all reinforce each other. These include rising scarcity of ore grades, increase in water demand, and an increasing recognition that the economic value of the environment over and above its potential as a resource. The 6th wave is more than finding new ways to generate energy. It's about minimising inputs, maximising outputs, and minimising or eliminating waste. This thinking provided a massive opportunity for a water treatment technology that went beyond the traditional chemical and membrane that dominates the world today. So Hydrus Technologies is a technology company, and our approach to the market is to adopt an outsource and manufacturing partnership style, to deal with compliance, quality, delivery and logistics, and then leverage implementation partners to operate our units in the field with their clients. The Hydrus model is the Intel Inside approach. We provide front-end technical sales, support, the hardware and training to operate it, and the back-end technical support. All our units are remotely managed and monitored, so we know exactly what's happening at every step. Our reason to build a manufacturing and implementation partner model is, with the one hand, to deliver a better product, but on the other hand, to streamline the legal and regulatory obligations and requirements upon us as a new entrant into the water treatment market, particularly those relating to the energy and mining sectors. So Hydrus is at the leading edge of the paradigm shift in the way water and wastewater is treated and processed in municipal, energy, industrial and resource plants globally. We have set the new benchmark in the cost-effective recycling of wastewater, the removal of harmful contaminants and the recovery of valuable nutrients and minerals. Positioned at the intersection of this shift, Hydrus offers exclusive patent-pending technology that provides significant cost and benefit analysis and productivity improvements across a range of industries with global relevance. Hydrus' approach has been to make it disruptive, make it enabling, develop a compelling value proposition, back yourself and go hard. Hydrus has developed and owns the intellectual property for advanced electrochemical and catalytic enhanced oxidation processes. That might sound like a mouthful, but we have a range of chemists back home in Australia that live and breathe this all day long. Our technologies have a broad application across the energy, mining, industrial and food production sectors. We have enabling technology that's proven capability to solve some of the world's major commercial, natural resource, hopefully your earthquake issues, and environmental challenges. Hydrus technology provides wastewater treatment, mineral recovery and environmental remediation solutions that use significantly less chemicals and labour inputs to achieve a greater treatment capacity with a smaller environmental and infrastructure footprint. We've developed the intellectual property that delivers high-value solutions, and around that we spent many years developing or working on an old technology called electrocoagulation. That technology was first invented in 1906 and wasn't ever much good. It wasn't until the mid-80s that an American made it tolerably acceptable with unpredictable outcomes, highly expensive, highly inefficient in our view, difficult to maintain, difficult to operate. So in 2006, we developed the technology, or we deconstructed that technology and at a molecular level understood how it works. What happens when you turn on the power? What happens when you change the flow? What happens with the total water matrix, boron at one level, barium at another? How do you really deconstruct water and reconstruct it without the contaminants? When we reconstructed the technology, we built what we call the Hydrus value spectrum. And that means if you look at the vertical market applications to the right, the more complex the wastewater stream, the lower the competitive landscape and the greater the value to Hydrus and its clients. We don't operate in the low end, municipal waste, sewerage and those. We have a value proposition there, but everyone else does that. We work in the complex to more complex end of town, which is oil and gas wastewater, acid mine drainage, nano filtration and other seriously complex water treatment issues that membranes and chemicals just can't solve or can't solve economically. By way of example, hydraulic fracturing has been around for a long, long time, 75 years probably, and it wasn't until about a decade ago that it was optimised and changed the game to produce the outcomes that we all know today. The electrocoagulation technology we've worked on has been around since 1906, but it wasn't until we took hold of it in 2006 and with Queensland University of Technology deconstructed it and turned it into what it is today. The first vertical market application that we're engaging with is the oil and gas market. We've invested considerable time and resources in conjunction with the Queensland University of Technology to further research and develop treatment solutions for the fluids used in exploration and appraisal, stimulation, completion, production and workover drilling operations. In Australia, our first phase of commercialisation was to prove the commercial benefit to customers. That at this climate means demonstrable bottom line savings and compelling operational efficiencies. You can talk environmental benefits all day long, no one really cares. Till you prove up the cost benefit equation and add the environmental benefits as a freebie, then you get the attention. They get to have both. So we built lab-scale demonstration units, then we built pilot-scale units, and then we built full-scale commercial units. Even adopting an implementation partner model, we've had to comply with quite onerous legal and regulatory requirements in Australia. Sometimes both Hydrus and our clients have had to sit on the side of the road for 2 to 3 months waiting for permits to be approved and access to be given, even for existing leases and existing permits on a particular site. The process we expect in Australia, we think it will, the dialogue we're having with regulatory environments and authorities is that will become easier as people get to know more about what we do and the value proposition we bring to the oil and gas field services. So this is our first trailer we built. It's operating in Australia now. It will treat up to 7,500 barrels a day of almost any kind of water you like, but this one is optimised for oil and gas production water or frac flowback water. It's fully automated. It's managed by off-site telemetry. It has real-time water analysis and can be scaled to suit any volume, up or down. The unit, that's a shot of the inside of the unit, so they're all managed by telemetry. We capture all the big data for future field production or for management use by our clients. It has minimal labour inputs required. Simply a roving technician on the oil field can monitor the device 2 or 3 times a day, and it can manage a wide range of contaminant inflows without recalibration. To give you an example of how we operate, we take a water sample from the client and we undertake a very, very detailed and comprehensive water analysis to understand the entire water matrix. Then we ask the client what it is they want as an outcome of this water, depending on whether it's for reuse or whether it's for environmental discharge, for irrigation or cattle stock watering, etc. We then run the water through our stage 1 device in the trailer and we'll produce the results that the client requires using using pH, pressure, electrical potential, oxidants, catalysts and some proprietary accelerators that we've developed. The stage 1 EC technology in this market, certainly in southwest USA, is sufficient for reuse in the fracking or in the oil and gas field. We can take out boron to required levels, barium, iron, bacteria and other contaminants, so we can, to an extent, dial up the water mix required for the next frack job. To the extent the client requires improvements in water quality, whether it be for irrigation or, dare I say it, drinking water quality, but environmental discharge, we can run it through stage 2 or stage 3 Hydrus technology, all resident within the trailer. That's a photograph of production water, or frack water, I think in this case, flowing into the trailer and clean, clear water flowing out at a rate of 4 gallons per second. And the shot on the right is a benign Australian EPA-approved spadable landfill. So there is no contaminants in the sludge, there is no contaminants in the water that are of concern to any regulatory authorities in Australia. So the Hydrus proposition is to buy less fresh water, haul less fresh water, treat wastewater on site for reuse and avoid hauling waste off-site and disposal fees. The commercial drivers and regulatory framework developing around the world plays directly into Hydrus's thinking around this and our commercialisation strategy. The shot there, you can see that the top sector is without recycling. I think that's probably what happens across the US in many cases today, maybe not all. But the water is hauled in, is used to frack, and it is carted off-site and disposed of down a well. Our proposition is close the loop. Take the water out of the well, put it into a holding tank, let us treat it, and we'll put it back into your freshwater tank at a rate that keeps your drillers up to speed. The Hydrus technology value proposition is to reduce transport of fresh water to site, reduce transport of fracture flowback or produced water off-site, eliminate waste disposal charges, improve water use and management logistics. You'll end up with final products that are clean, clear water and a benign, spadable landfill. The treated water can be reused in drilling operations, stored or for safe environmental discharge, and we can dial up specific water outcomes. There isn't a technology that we've come across that can degrade refractory organics, particularly used in fracture flowback fluids, like Hydrus can. We can produce multiple options for water treatment. We can produce to fresh water for discharge. We can produce water for reuse. We can have a custom solution depending on the water requirements, and we can deliver onshore or offshore benefits. The financial benefits include reduced freshwater purchase and transport costs, reduced wastewater transport costs, reduced wastewater disposal costs, reduced chemical costs, reduced labour costs, and reduced capital expenditure. It's the way we look at it, we can reduce the cost of water by 14 to 40%, depending on where you're drilling and what the logistics are around your particular operation. The environmental benefits are more compliance. Now, as I said before, the companies we're dealing with in Australia and the United States, it's all about the money. Show me the money, talk about compliance or regulatory or environmental compliance next. We have the benefit of offering both. The second one comes free. You get the good corporate citizen status. People are sick of having trucks barrelling down the highway, 3 a.m, road degradation. There's a whole range of good things around better environmental compliance, whether that's now or coming. We also believe that we can offer a better, more sustainable oil and gas operation because our water treatment costs are less. That's the spadable, benign landfill that comes off production water. In Australian standards, that is EPA approved as a second-grade landfill. So there's nothing hazardous, nothing toxic. It can be disposed of either on site in the drill area or to any unregulated landfill for nominal fees. In 2014, we won a competitive bid process in Australia for a fracture flowback treatment job in the Cooper Basin for one of Australia's largest oil and gas providers. We beat 9 other tenderers in that process. The other 8 or other 9 were Houston-based guerrillas, incumbents. So with that in mind, we felt back in February 14 we should come to the US and at least have a look to see what the landscape was here. If we could win in the Australian market, we thought we had a value proposition in this market. In Australia, the client said to us we had the best water treatment technology they had ever seen to treat production water at the right price. Since making several trips to the US since February, my wife and I are now token Texans. We live here and we have established operations. We've set up a laboratory facility with ALS on the Southern Freeway, where we're now conducting demonstrations of clients' water in our lab, demonstrating the sorts of results we can deliver. We start manufacturing next month. We've selected a manufacturer in the US and we're building our first 6 units, and we'll be engaging in pilot trials, full-scale pilot trials by December, and writing case studies. At that point in time, we want to engage with the market and make our technology known and invite anyone in the room who wants to come and see it or engage in the process to speak up. So we've entered an agreement with our manufacturer. We're in discussion with oilfield services companies to deliver our solutions to the field. We won't operate. We are not operators. There's better companies to do that than us. We are, as I said, the Intel Inside model. We'll work with E&Ps. We'll either find out who their incumbent water treatment provider is and work with them, or we'll deliver our partner water treatment provider. Either way, we'll stand with the solution provider to operate by remote the unit and provide back-end technical support as required. So the legal and regulatory landscape in Australia, we find, is far more extensive and more onerous than we've come across in the US so far. Admittedly, our experience here may be limited to the southern states. In Australia, we can reuse the water without any further permits, provided we are within a certain set of guidelines. So provided we can demonstrate regularly through an independent party that that water or that sludge falls within the guidelines, we have a fairly wide range of things we can do with it in the oil field. The key issues we see in the United States are reduced consumptive use, reduced disposal, reduced downhole toxicity and other flow-on effects, and the regulators accommodating storage and treatment. Certain states we've learned have adopted regulations that allow produced water to be reused. What we mean is that both state and federal produced water policy for the past few decades has been structured around managing product water as waste, and we don't see it that way. In the past few years, we've seen innovation by oil and gas operators and service companies to utilise produced water in a recycled capacity. Recognising this opportunity, states like Texas and New Mexico have adopted regulations that allow for this waste to be reused. Other states, including California, Wyoming, Colorado and others, allow for direct discharge of treated water meeting drinking water standards. We think the bar is a bit high there, and I think we can deliver very acceptable agricultural or stock water purposes without necessarily meeting a drinking water standard. We don't think there's any risk to the environment by not meeting quite that bar. The BLM has, on the other hand, slightly tougher regulations, but I think there's some rhetoric around some of their policy changes that suggest they may be open to more of a softer approach to recycling and reuse rather than just storage, containment and using frac tanks to lock it away or dispose of it. No matter what happens from an environmental point of view, we see that the go-no-go decision with any producer is the cost-benefit analysis. So back to, we provide a cost-benefit analysis, and the environmental solutions come free of charge, in our case. So what's the better outcome? Produced water recycle and reuse supports humanitarian and environmental objectives. On supply side, recycling produced water reduces freshwater competition between oil and gas industry and municipal and agricultural users. On the disposal side, it reduces the potential for environmental degradation. Containing produced water using in-ground impoundments provides for economies of scale that are safer for the environment when utilising engineered systems to contain post-production treated water. By contrast, stringing frac tanks together is much more difficult to manage, leaving room for human error and spillage. So what's the better outcome, both economically and environmentally? Trucks, chemicals, re-injection and environmental risk, or reduced water consumption, reuse, cost saving and efficiency, which is we call the sixth wave of innovation. So in our words, the future of wastewater management is to economically remove contaminants, extract valuable minerals or nutrients and recover water for reuse or safe environmental discharge. Hydrus's approach has been to make it disruptive, make it enabling, develop a compelling value proposition, don't stop overcoming the hurdles and go hard. Thank you.
Do we have time for a few questions? Go ahead.
Sure. So your example showed a TDS of about 10,000 milligrams per liter, but a lot of produced water is more like 100,000 or even 300,000. So do you know what the maximum level is that your technology can treat?
We haven't come across a hypersaline water that we can't treat. We won't take the salt out of the water. That's something that we don't do. To the extent you need to manage TDS, we need to use a membrane or blend or some other requirement. We'll take out every other contaminant. So if you are using a membrane, it will work without fouling, but we won't take out TDS, and we haven't come across a level we can't manage.
Rick? All right, and following up on that question, so if you wanted to discharge fresh water and you used a membrane, what typically would you use, a reverse osmosis membrane or some other type?
We have several membranes that we use depending on what the water is that we're starting with. RO is a common one. There's some, we think, some better membranes that are more applicable to our technology than others, and we would blend a side stream to manage the TDS level to the required outputs.
Okay, so you would take fresh water and bring it in to dilute the produced water down where the membrane could handle it? No. Because RO's got a maximum efficiency of about 50,000 TDS.
Yeah, we have a series of membranes that we use in Australia depending on the TDS. We won't use any fresh water. We'll simply treat a side stream of our water to blend and make the blend mix to treat the to produce the output requirements.
Okay, a side stream of your water, your treated water, but it still has chlorides in it. It still has the, you haven't taken the chlorides out, so you're going to, I don't understand how that's going to dilute the
You guys can talk after.
Okay.
There you go.
Look me up.
Good conversation. Go ahead.
Secretary Teague, I'd like to just, as the Californian in the room, I'd like to invite you to come to dinner with Jerry Brown. Very interesting presentation. Can you speak a little bit to your technology's ability to remove T-norm?
To remove, sorry?
Technically, norm, naturally occurring radioactive materials in English.
We have run tests on the Olympic Dam in Australia on radium-225, radium-226 and others. It's all been brought within approved limits. Happy to talk to you offline about specifics around that, but we can address that issue.
Have you been able to establish an avenue for your byproduct of minerals within Australia?
Depending on what the starting water is, the sludge can have some downstream value, whether it's pelletized as fuel. We're treating some dairy wastewater that is a stock feed or a fertilizer. So absolutely, it's a manageable item.
Okay, one last question, go ahead.
What kind of range of ballpark treatment costs are you able to offer customers? I understand that's sensitive, but if you give me a rough dollar per barrel, do you have any sense of that?
Not sensitive at all. The real answer is it depends. Depends on the logistics and a whole range of things around a particular requirement. But let's say the range of 50 cents to $2.50 to turn water into reuse.
You mentioned, so you're commercial with the trailers of 7,500 barrels, but I guess how much total capacity do you have in play now commercially?
In Australia, we have 4 trailers operating, and we're now building 6 in North America. The Australian market is, you might say, somewhat depressed in the oil and gas space, and what's one of the motivations for coming to this market here. Despite the oil price at $40-something, we have quite a compelling value proposition, arguably more than when it was 100. So this is a market we're growing in, and we hope to have our pilots operating in the next 8 to 10 weeks.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Let me just go through the agenda for a minute. We're going to be taking a break and be back here at 3:05. And then we have one last speaker, Kathleen Jackson. I'm sorry to do this to you, Kathleen, because it's between Kathleen and the reception. We do have a reception after our last keynote. Kathleen is going to be talking to us about the progress that's been made since the May workshop that we had, and I think that also will be some very interesting detailed data about what's going on in the state of Texas. So please come back. 3:05. Thank you.